Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Climo. I'm one of the NorCA Board of Directors, and I will be chairing the session. Relatively straightforward agenda for today. So Becky, I'll introduce to Becky Rourke in a minute, who's going to do a short session around insurance needs. And then Sean, I believe you are going to take us through both elements of the sort of fee review direct service kind of component to this. You're doing what two people normally do in the other sessions, and then we will have a little bit of discussion around fee review process, direct payment support services, and sort of things, some of which we will have with NCC colleagues present to make sure we can answer any kind of queries, and then we'll just have a private discussion in case there's anything you want to bring up separately. Caitlin, do I need to plug events as well for this group?
We've got a Shaping the Market webinar all around safeguarding with Norfolk County Council on Tuesday the 2nd of December, and that's an online event. And then there's also some in-person workshops, which I believe are starting next week, which is around how care is commissioned. I'm hoping Sean will have the info for me. Come in, Sean.
I wouldn't necessarily have the info, but I would argue that both are probably quite relevant in that these sessions often happen without the voice of individual employers, and therefore the whole concept of direct payments and individual employers sometimes gets overlooked. So I would argue that it's really relevant for individual employers to be able to see A, if they want to, and B, have an input, because amount of times we've said, oh, we didn't know anything about this, and it was, oh yeah, but that's all for providers. But actually individual employers are commissioners of care, so it's important that they understand and have a voice into how those markets are shaped, because I think it's very relevant. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, that's great. Thank you, Sean. That's really helpful. So I'll pop all of the details in the chat. There's the Shaping the Market webinar on Tuesday, the 2nd of December in the morning. And then there are 3 in-person workshops about how care is commissioned. There's one in Norwich, one in Kings Lynn, and one in Great Yarmouth. So hopefully you'll be able to attend one of those. But I will put all of the details on how to book on in the chat now.
So without further ado, I will hand over to Becky Rourke, who's going to talk about insurance needs. Becky is an account executive at Fsih Insurance. Becky, over to you.
Right, okay, well, I will share my screen in a minute. Fsih Insurance, so what we do is we provide insurance for individual employers. We have a contract with Norfolk County Council to provide this for everyone who is on a direct payment who employs a personal assistant. So within that, what we provide is the legal responsibilities of being an employer, which is to have employer's liability insurance. We include public liability insurance. We have cover in there for 24/7 employment law and health and safety advice. So if there are any questions, queries, anything happens that you need support as an employer, you can phone through to that helpline. Any advice given by that helpline is fully indemnified. So what that means is if they were to give you some advice on a quite contentious issue, you take and follow that advice, they will be there to support you through anything that should come later or might not come later. So I'll mention the horrible word which no one ever really wants to hear, is if you ended up in an employment tribunal, they would be there to support you throughout that with all the legal help that you will need. So you've got basically what it is your own HR department within Peninsula who will be able to sort and help you through any issues you might have legally being an employer. Within the policy, there is also cover for redundancy. So if you do come to the end of employing a personal assistant for numerous reasons, there is cover in there to go towards the cost of redundancy. We do also provide training. So we have partnered with a training provider and do provide online training courses on all sorts of different topics for both yourselves as employers and your PAs. So for yourselves as employers, there is all sorts of courses on GDPR, data protection, and then handling difficult situations, being a manager, all those sorts of things. But then for the PAs, you've got manual handling courses, basic first aid, safeguarding, all those sorts of things are all available to all of our policyholders at no additional cost. So they are all in there. So that's sort of an overview of the policy, very, very briefly, because I know I could talk for hours about it, but I won't. So going on to the employment law side of things. So first of all, what I wanted to sort of put down is what are the main responsibilities of an employer. So first one and most important one is to comply with employment law. So that could mean issuing a contract, making sure that all of your employees have access to the statutory rights that all employees do have, that they are paid national minimum wage. Moving away from the employment law side of things is to make sure that there is insurance in place which complies with the Employers' Liability Act, which I think was 1969. Payroll, paying wages, making sure HMRC, pensions, right to work in the UK, and health and safety. So there's quite a lot of responsibilities. I'm focusing today on the employment law ones. So what is employment law? So it regulates the relationship between the employer and the employee. It outlines what employers and employees can expect from each other, and it provides employees with statutory rights. There's a big P and Peninsula on this page. We partner with Peninsula, who provide us with a 24/7, 7 days a week helpline to talk through and help you with all of these issues. So as this presentation is going to be out there, so that number is there, but it will be on all your insurance documents as well. There is also, I've not got it on here, an email address, which we're finding a lot of people have started to use that email address a lot more than they ever used to. So if you don't want to talk to someone on the phone, you can have an email conversation with them as well. So that's what employment law is. So contract of employment. So everyone who has employees should give their employees a contract of employment. And what it is an agreement between you and the employees. It needs to be issued in writing before employment commences. And what it details is employment rights, responsibilities and duties. It should reflect the working relationship. On this one, I always use myself as an example. I have worked for Fsih for 30 years. I still have my original contract for when I started 30 years ago, which is very different to what I do now. I haven't got a new contract in all that time, but what I have got is lots of little letters that have changed things over the years. So if there was a salary increase, which luckily there has been in the last 30 years, I'll have a letter to go with that. If there was a change in hours, which there was changes in hours, I've got a letter to go with that. So it as long as you have that original contract, it doesn't need to be changed every time there is a change, but some kind of communication with the employees does need to happen. Support can be provided with putting a contract together. So there is a team within the council who do help with that. Is that Heidi's team, Sean? Are you nodding at me there?
Yeah, it is Heidi's team, the employment services team, yes. The
employment services team. But also there is support within Peninsula to do those contracts as well, which what Heidi will probably and her team will probably do if they do come across someone who wants something, say, a little bit different in their contract, send you on to Peninsula and they'll help support with that. So there is support all along the way in pulling that together. And again, if any changes to a contract need to be made, there is support there. You can call up. So it might be that you need your PA to work longer or shorter hours and need to make a change to that contract. And then what you can do is call up and they'll tell you how to do that, rather than just, oh, well, saying to the PA, well, this week you're working 20 hours, next week I only need you to work 10 because my budget's been reduced, which wouldn't make a happy PA. And there are ways to do it within the law that make it, what's the word, compliant, and making sure you don't come unstuck with anything. So I mentioned before, on the list of employment law things, statutory provisions. So everyone who is an employee has the right to statutory sick leave, family-friendly legislation, maternity leave, shared paternity leave, adoptive leave, unpaid parental leave, time off for dependents, flexible working and annual leave. And there probably are some more that I've missed off that list, but there are all sorts of things. And what these do is it sets out how much this person is entitled to if they do go on sick leave, if they do go on maternity leave. And it is the basic legal requirement that you pay those amounts. You can, in your contract, increase these benefits in a direct payment. It's very rare that does happen, because that would mean it would come out of your money rather than the direct payment. So all the contracts that we provide are the legal minimum. But as I say, you can enhance that, but very few people do, because it does go outside the budget and you'd have to put towards that. So like the maternity leave, it outlines how long someone legally can take off, and not just a legal maximum but also a legal minimum, because some people will say, oh, I want to come back to work straight away, and well, there is a legal minimum that's after someone's had a baby, that they have to take off. So it shows all those things, and the support is there for all these different things through Peninsula. So if you did have a PA who came along and said, I've got some great news, I'm going to have a baby, your thoughts probably straight away is, what's going to happen, who's going to help me, what do I need to do? So picking up the call through to Peninsula, they can advise what you need to do on a legal basis. They can advise how to help with risk assessments and how the work will now fit in with a PA being pregnant. It might be absolutely fine early days, but as they get bigger, there's more risks, and they'll support you in how to support your PA in the working environment. So they're the statutory leave and time off things. Holidays was another one, so annual leave. Every PA is entitled to annual leave. Depending on the hours that they do work, this would be on a pro rata basis, based on someone who works full time getting 28 days paid annual leave a year, which is equivalent of 5.6 weeks holiday. So next point says part-time workers get less, so it is pro-rated based on the number of hours that they work. And public bank or public holidays, they don't have you don't have to give public and bank holidays off, but they are included. So if you need someone to work on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, then they aren't automatically entitled to those days off, because some people do have to work on those days, but they would get the time off at a different date. So it works like that. But if you think of like police, ambulance, fire brigade, all those sort of jobs, nurses, PAs, they all fit into the same category, where it's a job that is needed 24/7. It doesn't stop just because it's Christmas Day. Some people automatically think, oh, it's Christmas Day, I can have the day off, and it's not the case, unfortunately. So PAs should always be encouraged to take their holidays, and employers should take reasonable steps to allow them to do so, such as arranging for cover for them, or taking steps to put in contingency plans when you know your PAs are going to be off. Where it's not practical to give annual leave, or for your PAs to take annual leave, we would always suggest that you get advice on that, because it could, if someone doesn't take annual leave over several years and then thinks about it and gets some advice, they could say, actually, I was entitled to this annual leave, you've not let me have it. What are you going to do about it now? And you have a bit of a problem at that point. So it's really good to keep on top of that. And I have come across in my time of doing this job that PAs have said, I don't want to take annual leave. I only work a few hours a week. I don't want to take it. And they need to. And in a full-time role, and some PAs will be working a full-time role, if they don't take annual leave, it can have a health and safety risk, because someone can be working very long hours, can get very tired, and when someone's very tired, accidents happen, and then there's injuries, and there's all problems go along down that route. So the idea of annual leave is there as to stop people burning out and to stop accidents happening. So really important from that perspective, as well as a legal perspective. So problems that could occur, as I say, there's lots of things that could happen, but the things that we need to sort of think about. So absences is probably our most common one. Someone not turning into work, or being late, or regular sickness, and all that sort of thing. So it's keeping notes of all keeping notes is really, really important. And again, if it's happening regularly, pick up the phone and call through to the advice line and say, my PA has taken, it might be that they take Mondays off or Fridays off, and there's a pattern. But speak to the advice line, get that advice on what can you do. Can you doing return to work interviews, so when they come back off a bout of sickness, what was the matter? And then it can help you. I'm sounding really bad here that people aren't necessarily always genuine, but I'm talking about your worst case scenarios here. So you could have a PA who regularly has time off sick, and you ultimately know that they're not genuinely sick, that there could be something else. So it's how to nip that in the bud and handle it. If someone is regularly off sick and it turns out that they're not actually sick, then you could go down the disciplinary route. Peninsula again will help you through this. So first thing on that list is get advice. You will have all the information about why someone is not, they've not, it might be they're late. Let's use an example of someone is late, and they're late every single day they're working, and there's an excuse that they keep missing the bus. So you will have already had that discussion with them and know, but it's still happening, so you're taking it to a disciplinary stage. So you would get the advice. Peninsula would talk you through what you needed to do. They'd ask you to investigate, so you've got all your information there because you've written down and made notes when they've been absent in the past, and then you would invite them into a meeting and you talk to them about the problem, and then after that meeting you would make a decision on what to do next. So it might be to give them a warning. For more serious issues, so for example, if someone had there'd been a theft or something like that, it would probably jump from a warning straight through to a dismissal. But it's looking at those different things and how to do that. When you hold the meeting, they can be accompanied by someone. They do have a right to be accompanied. They usually say a trade union person, but I don't really know. You'd probably be able to help me better if there are trade unions for PAs. Sean, you've taken off mute, so I'm hoping you've got an answer on that one.
No, generally speaking, people don't have union representatives. There are
No.
some sort of general unions out there that can support if approached, but quite often they don't have a union rep, but they will often have someone with them for support, and that could just be a peer or what have you.
Yeah. So
I was just going to ask a question as well at that point, if you're happy. So
Yeah,
obviously, when I'm used to running these processes in organisations, there tends to be a sort of separation of duties, etc., particularly where someone has been accused or is a party to a grievance or an issue, etc. When you've got individual employers, you wouldn't generally have that separate process. So, Sean, I don't know if there's anything that you guys do to support that process, or there's a kind of expected good practice if it's just you and them, which very often it would be.
We would always recommend that if you are being supported by us, to call us first. By all means, go to Peninsula. If you're not being supported by us, go to them directly. But always, because what we'll tend to do is support with the process and involve Peninsula if necessary, and particularly around some of the more complex work. But obviously, for those that may be on the call that don't use the direct payment support service, then Peninsula is available and they will be able to support that, and they can advise and guide. But yes, certainly our employment services team will support with the step-by-step processes.
And Becky, if someone else is needed to run the process, for example, a PA submitted a grievance against their employer and etc., is that something where there's other support mechanisms for?
Right. We sort of see, first of all, is there anybody else, a family member, a close friend, someone who can support them? If there isn't, and there's absolutely no one within the council or anything, Peninsula do offer a face-to-face service, but that isn't covered under the policy, so there is a cost involved in it. So we exhaust every other avenue first. Quite often, Peninsula, someone calling through to Peninsula will ask them for that face-to-face support. I have things in place to say, don't automatically go to that. We need to go back to the council first, because obviously it's in with the budgets, and legal representation can be expensive. But we do have set prices for it all, so it's all there if someone does require that. But we always go last. That's last case, because there's a cost involved. So we try and get someone else first.
Sean?
I was just going to add to that as well. If you go down, if we're working, so the DPSS Employment Services team is working with Peninsula, and something is required, like a compromise agreement, which can get very technical, what we do advise, as well as, because Peninsula will represent the employer, sometimes we will support the employee to get outside counsel to make sure that they have the legal representation they may need in those scenarios. And actually, that's something we've worked with Peninsula to actually establish, that actually to make sure it's fair to not only the employer but to the employee when it comes to things like that. We will support that, so that there is fair legal representation on those compromise agreements, to make sure that it's nothing is queried after the fact. I didn't know what I was signing, those sorts of things. So we do support on that level too.
There is quite a lot of sort of, when there is a very complex case, we all tend to work together. So it's usually Sean, myself, Heidi, and we will support alongside Peninsula as well. So if someone is struggling, we're all here at hand to help out usually. So it works. It does work quite well. In fact, probably one of the better local authorities that we work really well all together. So so that's problems. I've added in here ongoing responsibilities. So it's one slide. I have a deck of slides that I use for sort of employ with confidence sort of presentation. But I think this slide is a really good sort of, it takes into account the employment law, but also real life. So induction processes, so a PA knows what they are doing, what is expected of them. And I always go back to, and it was an event I did, we did a bit of a roadshow many years ago around Norfolk, and there was one lady who came to the first roadshow event, and you could see her sat at the front of the room, and she was very new to everything, and she was intently listening, but she looked worried as well, and she'd only had a PA started for about a week, and she came at the break and spoke to one of us. I'm not entirely sure who it was, but she came and spoke to us, and she said that she had a problem and she didn't know how to handle it, and it was because her PA had started, but she didn't take her shoes off when she came in her house. And we sort of asked her and said, well, have you said that you want your PA to take your shoes off? And she said no, because she's coming to work for me. And she felt it awkward asking that question, and that has always stuck with me. And it sort of really outlined how it was so important to have an induction process when a PA does start. And it's for sort of that could have escalated massively and upset people, and then you get into a legal battle over something that which seems very, very silly to start off with. But that induction process is really important, and supervision that doesn't necessarily happen in a home environment, whereas in an office you will speak with your manager and you'll have like a one-to-one or something. So those little chats where you're checking in and making sure everything's okay stops all these employment law issues happening. We had another gentleman who, this wasn't in Norfolk, this was somewhere else, who had his PA cooked for him, but he didn't like the way she cooked, but he never said anything. And then one day just got a bit cross and said, I don't want you to work for me because I don't like how you fry eggs. And that doesn't fall within employment law, and it seems dead silly, but it is something that ended up in an employment tribunal over frying an egg that could have been a conversation which would have stopped that issue. And all these other things that I've got listed here can aid sort of stopping issues happening, and it works both ways. It's not just the employer, it's the employees as well. So value and respect, flexibility coming up to Christmas. One thing I always think about is you know, PAs with young kids who might have nativities, who might want to take some time off to go to the nativity, and sort of being flexible that yes, we can do that, but can you work another time? And it's those sorts of things sort of it's not everything is always rigid. Obviously, if you've got needs and you have to do things at a certain time, then it's a different story, but it's swapping and changing, and is there another PA who could support at that time? Learning and development, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Flick Learning, so the PAs do have access to learning and development. The courses that we have on Flick Learning, there are about 250 on there. Not all of them are relevant for a PA employer, but they can have access to them. So if they wanted to go away and do some development in their own way, they've got access to that portal and they can use it. And then communication and clear boundaries, again, stop issues happening. So I move on from that. So changes that are coming. So when the Labour government took over, they set into place the Employment Rights Bill, and that is changes that are set to happen. And the ones coming up in April, they are April 2026, statutory sick pay, which is SSP. They are going to remove the 3 days waiting period, and also remove the lower earnings limit for qualifying. So previously, someone who went off sick would be entitled to be paid a statutory minimum after 3 days, as long as they were earning higher than the lower earnings limit, which is when tax and national insurance kicks in. So that is going to be removed. So from day one, they will be entitled to SSP, and it doesn't matter how much they are earning. Family friendly, so parental leave and paternity leave is to become a day one right. So with those things before, I think they had to be working a certain amount of time at the point. So it was at the, I'm trying to think what it was, but there was a time frame and that will go. So they'll be entitled to that from day one. There is going to be a new agency set up, which looks at employment law. It's going to be called the New Fair Work Agency, and they can enforce statutory payments and bring employment tribunal claims on behalf of people. So we don't know what that looks like until it happens, but that is coming. And also, it will be automatically unfair to dismiss someone who is making a sexual harassment disclosure. So that becomes legal on the 1st of April. I move over. After the 1st of April, we have some other things coming. So October 2026, a requirement to inform workers of their right to join a trade union. So that might change my question before, Sean, whether people will start, it will become a right that they're informed of that. So that will probably go in a contract. 2027, there's a 2 years service requirement at the moment for unfair dismissal claims. That will be removed. So again, that will become a day one right for unfair dismissal claims. And there will be an introduction of a statutory probation period. So it will be set in law what we have to put in place as a probationary period. This one, which has lots of questions on this one, always 0 hour contracts. There's going to be a requirement to offer guaranteed hours to people who are currently on 0 hours or low hour contracts. And also to reflect their usual working hours, and they'd need to get notice or compensation for any changes to shifts. It's 2027. This it's not set in stone yet how they're going to do it. As soon as we do get more information, we will feed back. There's a lot of, well, we think this is going to happen, and people have different views, so we'll have to see what happens on that. But as and when anything is set in stone, we will feed back. We'll be there to support with that. And then in 2027, there's going to be an introduction of unpaid bereavement leave and the extension of parental bereavement leave to take into account miscarriages before the 24th week of pregnancy. So they're all things that are coming soon. So sort of watch this space on these things. And that's me. A whistle-stop tour of employment law. Any questions?
If there's no questions, thank you, Becky, for taking us through that. And I think just a reminder that, you know, it's a big topic and there's lots to kind of think about, and it's important to plan ahead and have the right things in place ahead of anything kind of going wrong. And there's a range of people you can reach out to for advice and support in getting the right things in place.
Absolutely, yeah. Ringing that advice line at the earliest possible, or speaking to the advisory service in the council, is your first key thing to do.
In typical form, when it comes to me and IT, on a day that I'm presenting, one of my screens is packed up. So when I share, which I'm now doing, I now can't see you guys because I haven't got enough screens to see what I'm doing and that. But yeah, thanks as always for having me. I'm going to talk through the Norfolk County Council annual fee review process slides. As Jonathan said earlier, this is oops, it's disappeared. These are slides that are generally presented by our budget and accounting services through adult social care, but I have volunteered to do those for you guys today because I tend to attend this session. So hopefully I'll get it right. I have quite cleverly made cleverly, I don't know if it's cleverly or not, but made plenty of notes to help myself as much as anything else. So but I can't now see you guys on the screen, so if you have got a hand up or anything, just someone to shout to me and I'll be quiet, switch screens, and then I can see you. So there's a lot on this slide. I'll just go through it just to help with just explaining what's on here. So this is all about essentially what's going to be happening from April next year and going through, and how we're working out within adult social care and the budgets and things like that. One thing we don't have is government budget yet. Now, usually that has come out by now, and therefore we're able to give you an exact understanding of how that makes us stand going forward. So some of what is on the next couple of slides is our best understanding of what's going to be happening, but we don't have the full information. So first thing on there, as we presented last year, actually, there's been in the last 8 years, there's been over £100 million worth of savings through adult social care, but the demand just continues to increase. 40% of the annual savings that needs to be delivered going forward is being met by adult social care at the moment, which, as you can imagine, is a challenge when demand is constantly increasing. So in the current year, what we have been able to do, thankfully, through additional funding, is inject an extra 59 million into the pot. So that has helped significantly with the pressures, but £59 million is very, very small money when you consider how much adult social care actually spends annually. But it does help. It does help to fill some of the gaps. But we are, it is a significant challenge. It has meant that we have, as the same as previous years, had to prioritise where we focus and the level of support that can be provided. We would all like to have vastly more money and provide additional services where we can, but the reality of the financial climate is that we've not been able to do that, and for a number of years, this is a number of years we've had to make those savings and find extra savings year on year. So we do have to prioritise those most at risk and those services that are most important. So when it comes to the economy, it always has a massive input into what we can do. So inflation has stabilised, which is really, really good. When during COVID we saw significant increases in inflation, but thankfully, in the last couple of years it has stabilised significantly. But we also appreciate that for everybody, the council, providers, yourselves as individual employers, everybody, there has been an increase in things like insurance costs, energy costs, food, everything has gone up. It does remain above pandemic levels, although the rate of increase hasn't continued on that sort of trajectory. But those higher interest rates and the rates pre-pandemic do have that significant effect on cost of living for everybody. And therefore, that adds additional pressures to adult social care, particularly from the provider front, because providers are charging more because their costs have gone up. We also have an aging population. I fully plan. I've lived in Norfolk all my life, and I absolutely plan to be here when I'm older. I love Norfolk; it's great. But we do have an aging population. People are living longer. Often people do have multiple long-term conditions, and certainly in the direct payments world, because that's what I can talk about, we are seeing significant increases in the complexity of this, and that adds to the complexity of services. So, and often that comes with an additional cost. So we're continuing to work with providers, you as employers, to make sure that the market is fit for purpose. And I'll talk about it in a second, but one of our biggest challenges, of course, is the workforce, and availability of PAs. So choice and expectations, people increasingly want to live at home. Absolutely right for most people that want to do that and get that personalized care, that flexibility. It is constantly adding more and more pressure onto those community-based services. So, the market has to adapt for that. And that's where it, comes into ensuring, onto the next bit, ensuring the workforce is there. COVID was a real, crunch point, that the levels of demand on all services across the board, and that includes personal assistance, that includes providers, that includes residential providers, significantly increased, and there hasn't really been a massive drop off of that. And nationally and locally, there are lots of incentives and initiatives, I beg your pardon, to try and increase and help with recruiting. So it is difficult, for example, with yourselves as individual employers, it is difficult at times to find personal assistance. As the direct payment support service here in Norfolk, we work really, really hard to try and increase that. We've got our PA register. We go out to jobs fairs. We work with colleges. We work with universities. We work with job coaches in the local job centres and stuff like that to promote the role of what it is to be a personal assistant. To hopefully change some of those myths that what it is to work in care, and about how different it can be working as a personal assistant, for example. We work really hard with that, but it is really, really tough market. It's tough for us trying to find PAs, and for you guys trying to find PAs if you're doing it independently. Really tough for providers, in the non-residential care networks, for agencies and all that, and often we're stealing each other's employees, and that's the last thing we want to do, because actually the market has to be supplying everybody. So it is a challenge, but we're trying, to as much as we can bring people into the world and careers of care, because it is incredibly rewarding. Care quality is improving across Norfolk. However, we do continue nationally to benchmark against other areas, and so we're working with CQC, we're working with other areas to increase that level of care. I mean, you'll all be aware that the CQC isn't involved with regulating personal assistance, so we take feedback from employers very, very carefully, and that's why we work with Fsih, to improve the quality of PAs out there. The flick training that's provided, and just on the back of that, just to clarify as well, with the flick training that's available, Becky said, there's 250 plus courses out there. One of the things that's really important to obviously also clarify is that if the training that is being undertaken by the PA is relevant to that particular role to support an individual person, then we will make sure that they are paid, they can claim their hours to do that training. If they want to go off and do other training in other areas to broaden their horizons, but it's not relevant to the job that they're doing for you as an individual employer, then they can do that, and the training is free, but we won't pay them for their hours. But things like that, to constantly improve the level of supervision and support that we give to employers to give to their employees, working, as Becky said, and that extra training is really, really important. And also we're looking, the visibility and sustainability, that pretty much that, although it's the last thing on the slide there, that actually covers pretty much everything on the slide. That sustainability is so important. And I was talking, I mentioned about the attending those other sessions that were advertised earlier, and they've been put in the chat. It's important that individual employers have that say. It's important that you have your say. You're able to shape those additional conversations as much as possible. I'll always, as much as I can, shout as loud as I can to represent individual employers as much as possible. But it's important that attendance in those wider things, because a lot of the time individual employers are forgotten about, and when we're talking about shaping the market on there, you've got things like residential and supported living services, but it is important to make sure that understanding those areas around personal assistance and direct payments providers, as outside of personal assistance, is really important. So we keep pushing on that front. The budget, as I said, we don't have all the answers to this yet. We haven't had from the government the complete autumn budget. We have to make some assumptions in that case, but we will probably have to adjust when we do get the information. Usually, I'll present these slides with that information, but unfortunately we don't have that at this time. But what I can say is, the government is committing a fair funding review. So just to clarify what that means, so the UK government plans to reassess how funding is allocated to local authorities in an attempt to make it more fair and reflect the local needs, and that can change potentially how much councils receive ongoing, and so it's important that they're actually looking at that, because sometimes we can be compared to other local authorities, and it is literally comparing apples and chalk, and it is really strange, and so that's a really good potential move. And also they're looking at a 3-year settlement, so instead of an annual settlement, government is looking to set 3-year settlements. That has its pros and cons, and while it sounds potentially like stability, we don't yet know what that's going to look like. So future allocations to budgets we'll need to have changes in there, and the long-term planning, we're always planning long term, but we get the financial elements of it. But this will hopefully help us to plan long term and actually know how we're going to fund long term at the same time, in sync. So NCC are also planning how we're going to deal with the £62.5 million gap that we have at the moment. Adult social care is going to have to swallow 28 million of that. There just isn't enough money to provide the services. Norfolk County Council spends, I believe, I don't know the exact figure, but well over £1 billion a year on various different things. And adult social care is one of those big areas. But also, adult social care is really looking at prevention at the moment, and prevention is really key as to how savings can be realized, because actually if we can prevent people coming, if we can do the work and spend the money at the beginning of a person's journey and prevent them actually going into either long-term care or long-term requirements for services, then it makes much more sense to prevent someone's situation escalating. So there's a big push on prevention going forward. Then got on there national living wage. It's not been announced. There has been announced by the Low Pay Commission that there's potentially, it's been recommended around £12.71, so that's to be a 4.1% rise, but we don't have the final figure. There's a range been banded around at the moment. We don't have that final figure, but important to say equally that what we tend to do, and actually I'll put it at the bottom, regarding the national living wage, currently it's 12.21, but NCC generally sets their minimum that we want people to be paid a little bit higher than the national living wage. At the moment, the national living wage is £12.21, and for PAs, we ask for a minimum of £12.38 to be paid during the day, and then £12.21 at night. As I say, historically, Norfolk's minimum is above the national living wage, but there's been no decisions made for what's going to happen from 2026 yet. Usually we get that at the beginning part of the year, but the budget needs to be given to us first to be able to work out what we can do. So inflation, so the consumer price index on there. So at the moment, the consumer price index is the main measure of how they measure inflation. It shows how much the prices for goods is likely to increase compared to the previous year. At the moment, we're at 3.8%, which means from last year it's roughly 3.8% more expensive to buy things in general. But so it says on there, the OBR estimate. The OBR is the Office of Budget Responsibility, and they predict that actually there's going to be a fall in inflation, which is obviously great news for everybody. Hopefully by 2026 they're looking at potentially they're predicting around about 2%. So, but we're awaiting the November update, and the forecast can change. We'll just have to see what happens there. But hopefully that will mean that there isn't the there isn't more pressure on the budgets for increasing prices across the board like there has been. Obviously prices will go up, but hopefully not by so much, and therefore the pressure on the budget will be hopefully less. There's also the Fair Pay Agreement is out for consultation at the moment. So this is a proposal by the government aimed at setting minimum pay conditions across certain sectors. I think Becky touched on that a little bit earlier. And often the social care or lower paid industries can be, it would be potentially really affected by this, hopefully. So it's out for consultation at the moment. So that includes employers, unions, councils, and lots of other people that are potentially involved. They're asking for feedback before final decisions are made. Any decisions that are made won't be implemented until 2028. And even if they are agreed, some elements of it may not take effect fully for several years. The government has put an extra £500 million of funding in to allow for this, to support this initiative, which is great. I'm not saying for a second that we're going to get £500 million, but we will hopefully get a fair share of that to help us with that, if that affects us financially wise. So we don't have details of what this means yet. There's no clear information yet, but it's hopefully going to be really favourable for the lower paid working sectors, which often social care will fall into. But watch this space. Hopefully we'll have a bit more information on that in the coming years. Just briefly, and I don't know how I'm doing on time, so if I need to hurry up, please someone just shout hurry up. Just known drivers on costs. I'll go through this just really quickly. 60 to 70% of spend in social care is on wages. So and increases in inflation, increases of national living wage, has that effect. Our budgets aren't likely to go up in line with the increases. So but that is most of where the increase of cost comes from. I'm just realised I haven't moved my slide on. Sorry. Haven't moved my slide on for ages. Move the slide on the ones I'm looking at, but not those. So apologies. So known drivers of cost, as I said, on the previous slide, I said 60 to 70% of costs are allocated with labour. The other 30-40% are general costs, and I touched on this a little bit earlier when I was talking about inflation. So and that's things like heating for providers. It's fuel. It's all those sorts of things that costs businesses more, and therefore has an increased demand on the budgets that social care have. So hopefully, if that inflationary figure drops to 2% next year, then there will be hopefully less demand, or less increased demand, if you know what I mean, on those budgets. Financial planning, finally, just coming on to that. So the financial measures, the pressures for 2026-27 are really going to be really challenging for us. Of course, it's the same every year. There is uncertainty because we haven't had that budget yet, so we don't exactly know what it's going to look like. But we will have to, as we always do, tighten belts certainly in certain places. But I think there's going to be, certainly, as I said, within adult social care, that focus as much as possible to invest in prevention, which will be better for people, and it will be better for the bottom line for adult social care as well. And I think that's really important. So that's where sort of the intelligence of these engagement sessions and that, and any feedback we get from these engagement sessions, and I'll tell you how you can feedback in a second. It says on there it's important for officers of the council to make sure that we are looking at promoting diversity and quality of provision of service is really important. So that's Section 5 of the Care Act, and we're always looking at that, but at the same time having to do that within the budgetary constraints that we have, but it is always at the front of our mind. Elected members are then going to make a decision in January exactly on what the budgets are once we've got the full proposals. But equality is important, and it's important for providers. It's important for you as individual employers, because it makes us think about the choices that we have available for us, and they'll implement a plan around that. But I will continue to push, certainly from my point of view, that individual employers have a say in that, and so that absolutely sort of leads on to, if anybody on this session does have any feedback or any input that following sort of going through these slides that you may have, please do send it to the market.development@norfolk.gov.uk, and they will take all your individual feedback as you as individual employers, and they can help to do that. And as I say, it is really important for me to make sure that you guys get the opportunity, that if you want to feedback, that you do, because it's always a risk, and it's always something that I'm trying to shout loud about, is making sure that you're not forgotten about. You are a significant, individual employers are a significant procurement force, if you like, within Norfolk. You employ an awful lot of people if you combine everybody together, and so your say really does matter. So make sure you have it if you've got views on it, so please do. That was it from that particular point of view. Any questions on what I've said? I've now got you back on screen now, so if anybody's got any questions, please do shout.
Any questions? Well, I was just thinking about that. One of the things I've said in previous sessions that I think, because it came out of our question the first, just to put some of those numbers in context. So the 54 million, which was the extra funding that was injected into the adult social care budget, that's roughly 20% of the adult social care budget for Norfolk. That £28 million saving targets, that's roughly 9-10% of the budget that's a required savings amount. And that 500 million that's been injected into the sector theoretically about the Fair Pay Commission, if you very simply divide 500 by 154 upper tier local authorities, that's 3.2 million. So it's not even a very large percentage of NCC's current year savings targets. Again, it's pretty easy when you start talking about millions and billions to not quite ground it in what stuff means locally.
Yeah.
Any questions on any of that? NorCA will be submitting a response to the Fair Pay Commission consultation. If you have any thoughts on that, please do get in contact with us directly. Caitlin will also put in the chat, and we'll send around later. We're doing another one of our quarterly surveys, which has got a question on that, as well as some overlap with some of the fee review elements to it, some of which will be relevant to individual employers, some of which won't, but we still very much value your input.
Jonathan, do I have a couple of minutes still just to give a quick update about the direct payment support services?
If you want to give a quick update, and then if we've got no other kind of questions or kind of thoughts on that, I've got a kind of, I guess, a question I'd like to ask the meeting in terms of how we kind of do things in the future. But yeah, give us a bit of an update, Sean.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let me just stop sharing. I did put in there, Becky's actually answered the question and touched on it, because Martin Simons, who couldn't be here today, he had a question around 0 hours contracts. I will ping these slides over, but I won't go over it because Becky's already covered it. I didn't, and probably did it a lot better than what I was going to do. So I'll stop sharing for the moment, but I will ping that out in the slides. So that's all good. Yeah, just a quick update really for the direct payment support services. We are at a crucial time at the moment. So I've presented a couple of times in the previous sessions to say, obviously, we're replacing our payroll system. Today, we are running our last payroll run. It's a supplementary run that we run after the main one, just to cover anybody that sent in timesheets that didn't make it for the deadline. We're running that today on our existing payroll system, and so as of tomorrow, effectively, we will be on our new system, which is very exciting for us. We have written to all individual employers that use the system. I will say, I put an easy read letter together. Everybody was sent it in black and white, which was a bit of a disaster for us. I promise you it's not me being stingy and not paying for colour. I had said we print it in colour, but the colour printer went down. So it was either miss the opportunity to send it in a reasonable time or send it black and white, and they took the decision to send it black and white. So my apologies, not me being stingy, I promise. But we sent it out just to give a few bits of information about, you know, what's going to change, what you're going to see. New pay slips, for example, they look slightly different. Really exciting because for most, the bottom right hand corner of the pay slip will have accrued holiday hours, which is very exciting. You know, Becky was talking earlier about making sure people take holiday. Every payslip's effectively going to prompt someone on their holiday entitlement, what they've accrued, what they've taken, and what their balance is based on their accrued hours. So it's really great for us, and hopefully for you as employers as well, and for PAs, because it is so important that PAs do take their holiday where they're provided. So we're going through that at the moment. I did say in previous sessions, we're doing our implementation of a new payroll system in 2 stages. So stage 1, which is about to happen, is that we're moving over and we will be using the system, the back office system, to process payroll. So the next payroll, 10th of the month next month, will be done within our new system. We have tested it to destruction, and thankfully it hasn't been destroyed, which is absolutely brilliant. It's more than happily coped with everything that we've thrown at it, which is absolutely amazing. So that will be going live, and then in January, February time, we'll start communicating people about onboarding onto portals if people want to. So there's the employers and the public, sorry, not the employers and public liability in portal. That's me thinking of Becky there. That's the employers and the employee portals. So the ability for employees to see their pay slips online in the portal, or see their P60s and any other employment documents. Also for them, if they want to submit timesheets online. And the flip side of that is the employer portal, where the employers will be able to see all the documents online themselves if they want to see that. You know, so exciting times ahead. But we're going to communicate that. We didn't want the pressure of doing it all at once. Quite frankly, I wanted to make sure my teams were happy and fully with running everything, making sure everybody's getting paid properly, and then we can slowly bring people on board with that. So it's very much a walk before we try and run situation. Was sensible. So yeah, other than that, we've still got our employment services team, as Becky's touched on a lot of that earlier. All that support that Peninsula can provide, all that support that is all those things for individual employers that are really important. They sound incredibly complex, but the support is there, not only through Peninsula, but also our employment services team, you know, and we're continuing to support people for as long or as little as they need it once they've recruited, once we've supported them to recruit, and we are available at all times if anything comes up. So I've put the employment services email address and phone number in there. So our payroll team have got exciting stuff at the moment. The employment services team is business as usual. Our customer services team, business as usual, and our welcome team is business as usual. And yeah, if you've got any feedback for that, I will put my feedback email address into the chat in a moment. But yeah, that's a quick update from me. Thank you ever so much for letting me update you all.
Perfect. Alfina, your hand shot straight up.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to just come in before you start, John. We've had a issue, was not really an issue, raised to us by an individual employee who couldn't make it today, Sean, and it just reminded me about you sending the black and white paper. They were concerned about the amount of paper that are being sent to them rather than, you know, maybe through email. So I just wanted to know whether anyone else is having the same issue, or if there is an option for paperless.
There will be the option for paperless via the portal when we go live with the payroll portal. So one of the things we're really looking at, particularly on the paper front. So at the moment we send like pay slips. Most are they're all sent with a covering letter, and they're all sent, and so there's 2 copies of a pay slip that goes to the employer with a covering letter. We're hoping that most employees will want to have their documents directly online, so we can cut out an awful lot of paper on that front. We're hoping that all those future communications will have the option of communicating for those employers that want to use the portal, the payroll portal. if they're using it, we won't send them a paper version. We'll be able to do that.
There'll be options.
So, yeah, absolutely. We'll always have the option of paper, and that's for the pay slips as well, and all other communications. There's always the option for paper. We desperately want to move to digital, and the payrolls portal will allow us to do that, but we're not, as I say, we're not bringing that in until April time. But there is a light at the end of the very costly, because it costs me quite a lot of money as well on postage each year, and I want to avoid that as much as possible and avoid the amount of trees that we use as well. So absolutely take that point on board. We try and keep things to a minimum.
I'll get back to them. Thank you.
Thank you.